In Exodus chapter 12, we are brought to the end of the story of the plagues happening in the nation of Egypt. God's people are in bondage to the Egyptians, they're in slavery, and God is working his plan to have them released from the slavery and bondage that they are in. He's working through the plagues, and he gets to the last plague, which will be the death of the firstborn in all the nation. Now, to protect God's people, to save them from this judgment, God institutes what he calls Passover, where they have to take some blood and spread it on the doorpost and on the lintel. And they also have to prepare a meal in a specific way and eat that meal. And in doing so, they remember the Passover. And in God seeing the blood does not bring the judgment upon their home for the death of the firstborn. And in the explanation of what that meal should be and how they should eat it, while these people are in bondage, there in Egypt, God tells them in Exodus chapter 12 and verse 11, says this, "In this manner you shall eat it, with your belt fastened, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover." It was that very night when Passover happened, the first one, that Pharaoh would be screaming and all of Egypt would be heartbroken about what was happening. And in that moment, Pharaoh would drive the people of Israel out of the bondage that he had them in and tell them to leave. And they just said, get out that very night. And so God told them, the way I want you to eat this meal is with your belt fastened, your shoes on. I want you to eat in haste. I want you to be ready to go, to get out of here as fast as possible. Well, we have a meal that we're going to share in together today, similar to a Passover type meal. Christ now is our Passover lamb, the one who was offered so that we would not have to experience death, the one who was given for us so that we could be released from our bondage to sin. But God wants us to eat this meal in the same spirit, in the same way that he asked the very first Israelites to eat the meal when they took the first Passover, in haste, ready to move as fast as we can out of our slavery. So as we take the bread and we drink the cup today, here's what I want you to think about as you eat this. To be a person ready to leave your sin as fast as possible. To be a person ready to run out of your false beliefs and the negative thinking and all the deterrents in your life that hold you back from walking by faith. As you take the bread and you drink the cup, I want you to remember the high cost that came to God himself for you to be released from your bondage to sin. And as you think about that, I want you to be ready to actually leave the sin that God has freed you from. So many of us hold on to our sin, whether we continue to indulge in sin or hold on to it in the form of guilt and regret. We don't ever really get out of Egypt. Stephen in Acts chapter 7 tells the story of the Israelite people. And he says in Acts chapter 7 that those Israelites, when they left Egypt, he says in their hearts, they returned or stayed in Egypt. So as you take this meal today, here's what I want to encourage you to think about. Don't be a person who remembers Jesus, his body and his blood, and what he's purchased for you. The freedom from your guilt, the freedom from your regret, the freedom from your shame, the freedom from the lies you believe. Don't be a person who takes that, but stays in your Egypt. Put the belt on, get your shoes on. When you take this meal, be ready to run and leave those things behind. Over in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, listen how Paul says it about Christ. He's talking to the Christians who are living and indulging in sin, who are just saturated their lives in sin, but still trying to be Christians. And he says in verse 6, your boasting is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Cleanse out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, as you really are unleavened. For Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. Let us therefore celebrate the festival, not with the old leaven, the leaven of malice and evil, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. This moment right now where we're going to take this meal with Christ, our Passover lamb, is an opportunity to take it not with the old heart, the old mind, the old life, but one with sincerity and truth. That means that you get to be honest right now with yourself. Are you still living in sin? Are you still holding on to false beliefs? Do you still have regret that you can't let go of? Now is the time to release those things and walk out of Egypt with Christ. Let's give thanks to God for the sacrifice that he has made for us through Jesus. And in doing so, let's put our belt on, our shoes on, and let's get ready to leave.